All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's 9 o'clock. We can go ahead and get started this morning. I had a few people ask for another copy of the book because we ran out. They're in this box right here. If you were one of those people, by the way, here, John, this is you. I'm about to throw it at him. If you are,
should I check it?
It should be right. If you are one of the somebody in particular said, I didn't get one, I want one. So if you're in this room, it's there, but you got to get here fast before they're gone. So, because I don't remember who it was, so I didn't set this up for you. So they're in the box. All right. So ideally, we are supposed to take this one chapter at a time, one class at a time, where every class is its own isolated kind of discussion. But we ended last week because I just got off on tangents, as one does, and we did not properly finish the discussion of last week's class, which was basically looking at all the other times outside of Eden when Satan makes an appearance or presumed appearance in the Old Testament. We'll get to the New Testament, God willing, next week. So I want to give the rest of that material its due diligence. That means we're going to kind of run into what should have been this week's study, which is the victories over the devil in the Old Testament. But I'll just say this. The victories over the devil in the Old Testament are all pictures and windows and events that look forward to the ultimate victory we have in Jesus. And a lot of those victories that we'll talk about in the later classes, we'll look back on those discussions. So if I end up shortchanging that, I'm not going to feel as bad as I did all week about shortchanging last week's study. So let's finish that. We ended last week by talking about the devil in the book of Job, which, other than the Garden of Eden, is the most prominent and obvious place where the devil makes an appearance. There's no speculation about it. You'll get some of the other ones in a little while, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah, or Zechariah, where it's like, is this Satan? Could this be something else? Maybe this is just a generic adversary, not necessarily the devil, but he is here in the book of Job. It is indisputable. And where we left off was the most bone-chilling section of the book of Job, and if not arguably the whole Old Testament, when it comes to the devil and his interactions with people. And that is Eliphaz's recounting of his vision that he received, which he thought was a vision from God, but which we, having read Job 1 and 2, know could not have been from God. And that's the important distinction. If we were not privy to the opening books or chapters of the book of Job, if we were following along with Job's mindset in Job's real time, we would be just as confused as Job was, wondering why all these bad things are happening to this good person. We would be just as, perhaps swayed by Eliphaz as presumably Eliphaz's peers were in thinking Job was evil, because Eliphaz brings to Job a very compelling, striking story. Not a story like it's made up, but an account of his life that happened to him where he had a vision. And in that day and age, receiving a vision from on high is not remarkable. I guess it's remarkable in the sense that it didn't happen every day to everybody, but it happened frequently enough that it's written about throughout the Bible. But to receive a vision from whatever the opposite of on high is, down below, I guess that's what it is, down below, that's a little more remarkable. And it only records here. So let's go back to that. Let's read it again because I rushed through it because of the 5-minute timer, which is always like 4.5 minutes. Let's look at Job chapter 4, and let's see again what Eliphaz said, and then we'll give that its proper due because there's some stuff we left out last week. Eliphaz 4, look at verse number 12. Mind you, the setup to this is what motivates the guy to say, here's why I know you're wicked, why I, Eliphaz, am justified in telling you, Job, that you're the problem. Which, having read Job's 1 and 2, we know is not the case, because God says Job is not a problem, that Job is upright, upstanding, righteous, and good. It is the devil who's trying to make a problem for Job. Eliphaz, chapter 4, verse 12, excuse me, says, Now a thing was secretly brought to me, and my ear received a little of it thereof. In thoughts and visions of the night, when deep sleep falls on man, fear came upon me in trembling, which made all my bones to shake, and a spirit passed before my face, and the hairs of my flesh stood up. It stood still, but I could not discern the form thereof. An image was before my eyes, and there was a silence, and then I heard a voice saying. Now before we get to what the voice says, 90% of what we just read corresponds to times in history when God does sometimes bring a vision to people. For example, and I don't have the verse on the top of my head, but you know what, I'm not going to speculate. I'm just going to be generic. You can look it up yourself. For example, not for example. Times when God speaks to people is terrifying. It's a sudden appearance of something that is divine and miraculous, usually a big bright light. And so, of course, a person who's not used to seeing something like that, it also frequently happens in the middle of the night, in visions, in times of sleeping and dreaming. You see that in the prophets especially. So necessarily, you're going to be a little weirded out by it. The hairs are going to stand up. You're going to be a little nervous. So all of that tracks so far. But then the voice speaks. And that's where you see the line of demarcation between righteous and unrighteous, God and devil. Because when the voice speaks, it says, verse 17, "Shall a mortal man be more just than God? Shall a man be more pure than his Maker? Behold, he, God, put no trust in his servants, and his angels he charged with folly." We'll come back to that. "How much less in them that dwell in houses of clay, whose foundation is in the dust, which are crushed before the moth? They are destroyed from the morning to evening. They perish forever without any regarding it. Does not their excellency which is in them go away? They die, even without wisdom." And from that brief statement, from that sudden appearance of some kind of spiritual being, Eliphaz deduces my friend Job, who is undergoing all these hardships, who I already am assuming and presuming, based on cultural thoughts of the day, has done something wrong to receive all this hardship. Now I get a vision from who I believe to be God, or a representative of God, telling me that Job just thinks he's too high and mighty, that he thinks he's too righteous and big. Can this mortal man be more just than God? Well, what's the answer to that? Can a mortal man be more just than God? No, that statement is truth. The devil loves using that. He loves using truth. He loves twisting it, but he'll use it first before he twists it, and then he keeps going. And he says, God doesn't allow people to be more righteous than him. God doesn't allow people to on their own, of their own accord, stand up on his divine level. God frequently smacks people down. Also true. In the middle of that, he even says, even his angels he charged with folly. Even his angels God smacked down. Now, if we are assuming, which I think we must, for lack of a better, that the devil is a fallen angel, an angel that you might say is smacked down, then is that not, for lack of a better word, or an ironically used phrase, isn't that very devilish of the devil to take an event that actually happened to him and to use it to twist the mindset of Eliphaz against Job? Because Job is not in the same shoes of a fallen angel who is being smacked down by God. Job is in the midst of someone like Eve, who is being manipulated, or his friends are being manipulated to attack Job and to hurt Job. Job is a victim here, whereas the devil presumably is a guilty party, assuming he's a fallen angel. The devil is guilty and Job is innocent. God flat out says so at the beginning of the book, that he is righteous and upstanding, innocent. So it just strikes me as a remarkable thing, but also very much in the wheelhouse of the devil, that he would, in trying to twist the mindset of Eliphaz against Job, that he would use as a passing aside something that actually happened to him, that even his angels he charges with folly, who is himself a recipient of that, to convince Eliphaz that Job is another one like that, someone that God has charged with folly, and his punishment is well deserved and due to him. Anyway, that just strikes me as such a brazen thing to say, but that is the devil. He is shameless. He is unscrupulous. He will say whatever he has to say and do whatever he has to do. So that's that. Eliphaz then takes it to Job, and with all of his conviction and self-righteousness, proceeds to accuse him and attack him. Basically doing the work of the devil. All this based on what he thought was doing the work of a vision of God. But as we pointed out last week, before we move on, you have appearances of God throughout the Old Testament, visions and things. God does not stand in the darkness. God does not linger in the shadows. God does not whisper twisting words, which Eliphaz might know they were twisted, but we do, having read the opening of the book again. When God makes an appearance in the Old Testament, it's with a bright shining light. It's either himself or it's an angel on his behalf, and it is clearly and obviously a being of goodness, of godliness, of righteousness, if not God himself. This, however, is nightmare fuel, and it should raise the hackles, is that the word? Of your hair like a cat? Yeah. Okay, by the way, pause. Last week I said don't change your horse midstream, which rightly so all of you thought was stupid, because it's actually two very sane statements I just conflated, which I shouldn't have. You don't change your horse mid-race, you don't change your boat midstream. I just somehow put those two together. So that's my bad. All right. That's that. Now we go to the Old Testament more in general, because we had those two very specific and deliberate references given in Genesis and given in Job. But beyond that, you have other appearances of Satan, other times when the devil appears. Hang on. All right, so look at 1 Chronicles. I'll give you just a second to get there because that's not one we usually turn to. But it's right there. Kind of, if you open your Bible, flat open, you're going to be in the Psalms. Take that and then open that in half, and you'll get probably to 1 Chronicles. So look at 1 Chronicles chapter 21 and look at verse number 1. 1 Chronicles 21 verse 1. Somebody read that.
Satan stood against Israel and cited David, the number of Israel.
So if you were doing just a basic word search, I'm going to try to find all the references to Satan, even though you know he's also called the devil and other things. But let's just start there. I'll find all the references to Satan. You pull it up and you get your list. You're going to come across this one. And if you don't give it any more thought than that, you'll think, okay, well there he is, Satan doing what he does, doing what he did in the garden, for example. He's whispering something to David, and he's stirring up something in David, and he's going to incite David to do something. My Bible says, I think, provoke David, but it might be incite in mine too. I can't remember. But yes, Satan provoking David is the meaning of the phrase. But you got to remember, Satan is not his name. And so when you read the word Satan, it's not always a thing to capitalize, if we should ever capitalize it. I guess we do that just for convenience sake. So because on the times we know it's Satan, it helps to identify him. But Satan is a description of his work. Satan is what he does. The word means accuser. The word means someone who opposes, stands in opposition to, and that's what he's going to do. Devil means adversary, same idea. So here you have a very basic statement, and it's written just very matter of fact, which in the translation, by the way, does everybody's Bible say Satan here?
Yes.
Okay. Translation, it makes it sound like Satan provoked David, and if you keep reading, what happens is he numbers the people, as is in secular world the responsibility of a king to number his people. You do that ordinarily to know the ages and the amount of fighting men that you have, so that you are prepared for whenever an enemy attacks. You're ready for invasion, you're ready for war. If you're going to invade or if someone's invading you, you know how many men you have to work with, so you number your people. Okay, that's all well and good usually, but Israel is not a usual nation. Israel is a nation whose God is the Lord, and whose God fights for them, and they hold their peace and they keep their stand while the Lord wins the battle for them. That doesn't mean there aren't soldiers doing some stabbing and some deflecting of arrows, but it is God who brings the victory. A fact which is shown throughout the Old Testament when often outnumbered Israel defeats larger, more well-established historically foes because God fights with them. Or times when Israel should mop the floor with somebody, they're defeated because God was not with them because of their sin, like an example of Ai. So what you have here is, just take the devil out of it, you have David, for whatever reason, deciding to count the number of soldiers, of fighting men that he has, and that angers the Lord, and God rebukes him for that. But why does David do that? The translation says Satan provoked him. Now, if you want to say that's the devil, well, by all means, blame the devil for it, because something tempted David, something provoked in David the desire to do something that he knew from history is not righteous in the eyes of God. If God orders the census like he does in Numbers, then fine. But otherwise, it's not your business. It's God's business. It's his army. So something provoked David. Something motivated David to do this thing which was evil. And obviously, sin comes from temptation, and temptation comes from the devil. Fine, blame him. But if you rephrase it, if you retranslate it from Satan to the more generic adversary, here's what it sounds like. An adversary came up and spooked David, and so he numbered his people. Now, if you take the devil out of it, if you look at it purely from a secular perspective, a king, his nation, and other nations round about him, what does that sound like? To me, it sounds like David got wind of some big army, and he got spooked as a leader of his nation, and he thought, I better number my people to make sure all my ducks are in a row. And I think that's the meaning there. I don't think it's directly identifying Satan as the cause. Although, once again, if it is sin, Satan's behind it, ultimately. But I think the usage of the word would better convey the meaning if you just translate it an adversary. Because that's what kings come upon all the time. An adversary rises up, well, I need to make sure I have enough men to fight them if they come after me. And that's a lack of faith in the case of David. And that's the anger of the Lord. So that's one. Let's give another one. Look at Psalm 109. Psalm 109, and look at verse number 6. Somebody read it.
evil man to judge my enemy. Put somebody at his right side to accuse him.
All right, find an evil man, her Bible says. What translation are you using there now?
Easy.
The what?
Easy.
Okay, the easy translation says an evil man. Does anybody have a different word to that phrase?
Wicked.
Wicked? Over
ESV
here?
is the same.
Huh?
ESV is the same.
Same? Anybody have a different word?
Satan.
So what?
Satan.
What translation?
King James.
Yeah, the old King James, the old Bible says Satan. And the reason why it translates it differently over here is not because it's some necessarily better manuscripts they're working with, but just they looked at the context and they thought this is a better usage of the word, which could be translated as Satan, or, as in the case of 1 Chronicles, could just be translated as something that is evil, something that is wicked, or someone that is wicked, or someone that is evil. So let's just consider the context here and decide, is this just a generic evil person, or is this the devil as we think of him as an actual individual person? What you have here is David as being, as he frequently was, attacked, oppressed, ganged up on by a plurality of enemies, and he cries out to the Lord, asking for deliverance, asking for relief, which in the case of the psalmist is not just save me, but also destroy them. That's kind of the yin and yang of the Psalms frequently. And in the middle of all this, what he asks basically is God to give his enemies the justice they deserve. That someone would stand in opposition to them, like in a court of law. That's what a lawyer does. Stands up and says, this man is accused of these crimes. Here's the evidence against them. And then the judge finds them guilty. David just wants that. What he's asking for is justice. But what he's asking for specifically is an accuser. Well, what's the word accuser that we're studying in this entire class? It's Satan. What he's asking for is a Satan to rise up against this person. Because again, Satan is not his name. It's a role that he occupies. But when Satan accuses, it's duplicitous, it's unfair, it's unrighteous, it's unmerciful, it's relentlessly evil. But if you stand up in a court of law and the evidence and the law is on your side and you accuse someone of doing evil and you bring evidence and charges against them, by definition, you're doing the work of Satan. Just the little s, not the big S. If the evidence is not on your side and the law is not on your side, you're trying to put someone away and they're innocent, then you're doing the work of Satan, the big S. Okay, that's the distinction. So all David is asking for is that for someone to stand up and help bring justice to these people who are attacking me. Having said that, here's the twist. Peter, 1,000 years later, will reference this psalm when talking about Judas Iscariot, the betrayer of the Lord. And he will take this text and apply it to Satan as the one who will accuse Judas of what he has done. So, but I don't want you to take this and work backwards and say because Peter uses this and makes it about Satan as we know him, the devil, the enemy, then that must mean what the psalmist was writing about. But rather, Peter was doing what every Jew did, what every reader and studier of the Word of God did, which is find little connections and little extrapolation points to make application to their lives. I guess we do that too, but I think that's what he's doing there. But that's just a little twist on it. So, Zeke and I are probably the only two guys in this room using the old King James. Maybe not. You might come across Satan in your Bible, your translation. It's not always the devil as we think of him. It could just be an accuser in generic terms. Here's another one. Let's read Zechariah 3. Zechariah 3, starting with verses 1 and 2. We're going to jump a little bit around this chapter. Zechariah 3, 1 and 2. First one there, read it out loud.
Then he showed me Joshua, the high priest, standing before the angel of the Lord, and Satan standing at his right hand to accuse him.
All right, everybody there? Does anybody's Bible not say Satan? We all on the same page here? All right, see, translations don't always matter in this case. All right, so let's understand, let's get our context. The high priest office, most important position in Israel, more than the king. Because even if the king is righteous and good, like a David or a Hezekiah or somebody, it is not the king who goes into the most holy place on Yom Kippur and offers the sin offering for the people every year. It is the high priest that does that. It's the high priest that facilitates the relationship between Israel and God. It's the high priest who stands, like in the original notion of it, Aaron standing beside Moses, one speaking for God, one speaking to God. Aaron speaking to God, Moses speaking for God. They work in tandem. And so the high priest occupies that very special role. Like in every other kingdom on earth, the throne or the palace or whatever of the king is the epicenter. The whole kingdom builds around it. In Israel, it's the temple or the tabernacle or the most holy place, because that is where the Ark of the Covenant is, and that is the throne. That is the seat on which God dwells when he brings his presence down among the people. So the high priest office, very important. Zechariah sees a vision of the high priest, who in his time was Joshua, the son of Josedek. And he sees Joshua the high priest in a vision, and standing to accuse him, standing in the role of Satan, he calls Satan, standing off beside him, in order to bring down the high priesthood, or bring down the relationship between God and Israel. I mean, this is not a class on Zechariah. Maybe David Reese will teach that this summer. I don't remember. But we can study Zechariah separately, not to get too deep into the weeds of the prophecy there. But to gist it, to give you the gist of it, he sees the embodiment of the relationship between God and the people, and he sees the one who is desperately trying to undo that relationship. And so here, when he says he sees Satan, he sees an adversary against Israel. Can you make some prophetic interpretation? Can you pull out of the prophecy whatever the real world events were that Zechariah is talking about, and say, well, it's not Satan, it's this nation, or it's not Satan, or it's this king? Yes, fine, you can do that. But in a vision, when you're seeing apocalyptic imagery, it doesn't matter that it represents something if there is still the thing it's representing something with. And the thing he sees is Satan. He doesn't just see an adversary, he sees the adversary. He doesn't just, in other words, you can take the vision, you can say he saw Satan, and you can say, all right, well, this is a vision of the Old Testament. What's the vision pointing to? It's pointing to this king, or it's pointing to this kingdom, or it's pointing to this future event. Okay, fine. But in a vision, you're seeing something. And he's not seeing some random king. He's not seeing some random nation. Like, how do you see a nation in a vision? You see representations. It's an apocalyptic image. So he is seeing the devil. Because you can't see an adversary in a generic term, because an adversary is what you do. You can't see what you do. You see the one who does it. You see them doing it. So he sees the one who does the adversarying in a spiritual way. So in this case, I think he sees the devil. And it represents other things, but there he sees him. As opposed to 1 Chronicles, where Satan rises up against David or whatever. That's just a generic adversary. So David saw something. The word simplifies it. Here, the word is what it is, I think, referring to the devil. I said we'd go in other places. We won't. I was wrong. That's Ezekiel. Let's go to Ezekiel now. Ezekiel chapter 28. Here is one of the two major Old Testament texts from which we derive a lot of our non-canonical understanding, or non-canonical ideas about the origins of Satan and about his backstory. It's taken from references made by Ezekiel and made by Isaiah out of context. And so this is, what you're reading here is original inspired prophetic writing that to our eyes is the origins of Satan, but it's not. It's the origins of Milton's Paradise Lost, Satan, not the Satan of the Bible. Ezekiel 28. Just to summarize, and then I'm going to have somebody read verses 12 and 13. But just to summarize, what you have in Ezekiel 28 is the prophet writing doom, words of prophecy, of punishment coming for Tyre and Sidon. These little city-state, independent kingdoms who have been causing problems and trouble and are going to be smacked down by Babylon in due time. And God is writing against them, prophesying against them as he does throughout the Old Testament. And these in particular he's now doing here. To say, you guys are too big for your britches, you've gotten too arrogant, too cocky, you think you can't be touched, so I'm going to touch you. You think you can't be hurt, so I'm going to hurt you, to show that I am the Lord. Very common Old Testament kind of theme. But it's the way in which God describes Tyre and Sidon that gives people, a pause. It makes them say, well, what am I reading here? Is this talking about Tyre and Sidon? It's because God is being sarcastic. And it's hard for us to wrap our brains around that, but he does that sometimes. God's people and God himself can be sarcastic. And he can say, oh, you're just like this. And they're not at all like that. They're the opposite of that. Because God's being sarcastic. So, for example, somebody read chapter 28, verses 12 and 13. Ezekiel 28, 12 and 13.
Son of man, take up a lamentation for the king of Tyre, and say to him, thus says the Lord God, you were the seal of perfection, full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. The sardius, topaz, diamond, beryl, onyx and jasper, sapphire, turquoise, and emerald with gold. The workmanship of your timbrels and pipes was prepared for you on the day you were created.
Oh, Tyre, you are just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. You are full of gemstones. You are full of beauty. You are full of wisdom. I've never seen anything as remarkable as Tyre. And this is coming from God. Well, not that I should quote the devil, but at least when he said that, he was telling the truth. He was just about to twist it. Can a man be more just than God? Or can a man be more beautiful than God? Can a man be more wise than God? And yet here's God saying, or even as wise as God. And yet here's God saying, oh, I've never seen anything as beautiful as you, Tyre, as he's about to make him not so beautiful, make him as ugly as an invaded nation or city is. So this is God's sarcasm. This is God's describing Tyre, the city, as this wicked people who, when they look in the mirror, they see this people of great beauty, this people of great wealth, this people of great merchandise, this people of great power and economy, and they don't realize that they are provoking and inciting punishment from the Lord. That's what's going on here. But the phraseology and the word choice, if you go into it with the idea of the devil, well, and if you've read Paradise Lost by Milton, you're going to pull this out of that. You're going to say, well, okay, they were in Eden, and they were on the mountain of God, and they were beautiful in the sight of God. Well, that's just like the devil. So we're not reading about Tyre, we're reading about Satan. Even if we were reading about Satan, Ezekiel is not prophesying against Satan. There must still be an earthly analog. So you must still put the focus on Tyre and Sidon, the nation states who are going to be smacked down by God. And what happens frequently, and it's very frustratingly, is people are looking for verses to scour and to find reference the devil, and they find these vague references because they're just doing word searches and ripping out of context, and they say, look, here's the devil, or here's a description of the devil. He was in Eden, he was beautiful, and he was wonderful, but then he was wicked. And they say, well, that's Satan. Well, maybe it's vague imagery, illusory to the devil, but the point is not the devil. The point is Tyre and Sidon. And I don't think he's talking about the devil at all. And if you didn't go into it thinking Satan, you wouldn't pull that out of that. Keep reading, somebody, verses 14 through 17.
I put you there with a cherub to be your guard. You lived on my holy mountain. You walked among the stones that burned with fire. Everything that you did was completely good from the day that you were born, but later you started to do wicked things. As a trader, you bought and sold many things. As a result, you became violent and you did evil things. So I sent you away in shame. I would not allow you to remain on my mountain. The cherub that had been your guard chased you out. You could no longer walk among the stones that burned with fire. But because you were so beautiful, you were very proud. You used your wisdom to do bad things because you loved to have beautiful things. So I threw you down to the ground. I let other kings see what had happened to you.
If you were not reading Ezekiel and you were just listening to Nana recite that, and if you were listening to her recite that, thinking, or if I had set it up as, let's talk about where the devil came from, you would make a lot of connections, wouldn't you? You'd be connecting a lot of dots there based on that. You have this very striking imagery in the middle of that reading where I cast you down to the ground. And that's how Paradise Lost begins, with the devil waking up, having lost his war in heaven. And he wakes up to wage a second war on God by way of attacking his people. And that imagery was lifted out of Ezekiel. But Ezekiel didn't put that there. He picked that up, but Milton picked that up, but Ezekiel didn't put that down. But Nana, read verse 14 one more time, just verse 14.
Put you there with a cherub to be your guard. You lived on my holy mountain. You walked among the stones that burned with fire.
My Bible says anointed. You were an anointed cherub. Okay, hers says I put you there with a cherub that was anointed or something like that. Your different translations? Do you have a different way of phrasing
anointed.
that? Huh?
ESV anointed.
Anointed. Anybody else?
ASV anointed.
Well, read the sentence exactly. What does it say?
Thou wast anointed cherub that covereth. I set thee so that thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down the midst of the stones of fire.
She's reading the old King James.
No, that's ASV.
Is it? Oh, that's the old ASV. That's 1901. I like.
I like that guardian, anointed guardian.
Anointed guardian, yeah. But the distinction is, are you the anointed guardian or are you given an anointed guardian? Because Nana's says you had a guardian placed there with you or something like that, right? You had a cherub that was anointed for you. And the distinction is found in the oversimplicity of the Hebrew language, which doesn't like helping verbs, and which doesn't like little in between words that we can link things together and we can help easily form a context. It's much more Keyword, 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 you figure it out. So there is a discrepancy. Are you the cherub or are you given the cherub? It doesn't matter, is the point. The point is, he's talking to Tyre and Sidon. He's saying that you were either blessed with all these wonderful things, God blessing you, or you were given all these wonderful things and you were blessed. So you're either the object or you're it's either passive or it's active. Either you are a blessed person or you've been given these blessings. Either way, they are in the same boat. And so it's don't read Satan into this like he's describing Satan. He was a cherub or he was someone who was given a cherub, as his companion or something. Because if you read through the rest of it, the rest of the reading that Nana gave you through verse 17, if anything, it's not Satan, it's man and woman, it's Adam and Eve. I gave you all these blessings, I put you in the garden, you had all this perfection, you had these wonderful things, and then you sinned, I cast you down. That's Adam, that's Eve. Far less than it's the devil, but that's more boring than making it Satan. And so people are quick to say, well, this is the devil, he was given all these beautiful things, and then he did wickedly, he was deceitful, and he was cast down. There's no devil in this, other than the fact that Tyre is evil, and the devil's always behind that. Someone read verses 18 and 19. 28, 18 and 19. And as you're hearing this read to you, I want you to think how, if this is Satan, how could this be about Satan? How could this be done to Satan? Verses 18 and 19.
You defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of your iniquities, by the iniquity of your trading. Therefore I brought fire from your midst. It devoured you, and I turned you to ashes upon the earth, in the sight of all who saw you. All who knew you among the peoples are astonished at you. You have become a horror, and shall be no more forever.
Here's what I'm going to do to you, you arrogant person. You person who thinks you're the most beautiful, the most powerful, the most wealthy thing on anywhere. Here's what I'm going to do to you. I'm going to so thoroughly smack you down that when other people walk by and see you, they will gasp in horror at you. I'm going to set you on fire. I'm going to destroy you. I'm going to leave you a smoking, burning cinder, so that when I'm done with you, you will be an object lesson for the rest of the world, not to get too big for your britches. A theme which runs throughout the prophetic writings. Isaiah loves that metaphor in the middle of his book too. That I'm going to just do all this so that people will see you and know that I am the one who is special, not you. That doesn't compute with the devil. At least not in the particulars. Like, obviously, there's a final judgment coming, and the devil and sin and death and all that will be cast down and cast out. That's the end of Revelation. But the idea that other people walk by and see you as they're going on their way, they'll just look at you and they'll see you, that is more about a place than a person. And that is a description of the justice that God is going to bring by way of Babylon against Tyre and Sidon. That is the reference in Ezekiel. The word devil, at least in any translation I've seen, or Satan, doesn't appear anywhere in that reading. But if you look up where is Satan in the Old Testament, it's in top 3. It's right after like Job and Genesis. This one, if not that one, then the next one we're going to go to. Somebody read Isaiah chapter 14, 12 through 15. Isaiah chapter 14, 12 through 15. And as this is read to you, I want you to be thinking, is this talking about Satan? I want you to be thinking Satan so you can hear how easy it is to make these connections that should not be made. Isaiah 14, 12 through 15.
How you have fallen from heaven, O morning star, son of the dawn. You have been cast down to the earth, you who were once laid low in the nations. You said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven, I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit enthroned on the mountain of assembly, on the utmost heights of the sacred mountain. I will ascend above the tops of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High.
Now, if you're thinking, here's the backstory of the devil, you've got a lot of material to work with there. Again, material which motivated a lot of Milton's writings. But Milton wasn't inspired, even though his book opens with, the Holy Spirit is my muse, but that's neither there. That might be Dante, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. Not inspired. So you've got these imageries and these ideas that we have kind of calcified in our minds by popular culture of what the devil's fall looks like. And you have phrases and statements like Isaiah is making here, like we just heard read to us here, and they easily overlap. We can easily make the connection. And the reason why we make those connections is because our thoughts about the origins of Satan come from these verses, but the verses didn't give them to us. People made that up and made the connection and forced it in our mind, and so we read it and we think about it. But this is not talking about the devil. And there's this one specific verse that makes it absolutely crystal clear. But before we get that verse, I want you to see how a similar verse is used to corroborate that. And that's a verse we talked about, I think, last week, Luke 10:18, where Jesus sends his disciples out to work miracles, to cast out demons, and they come back elated that they are able to do so. And they say, Lord, we're casting out devils in your name. And Jesus says, I beheld Satan fall from heaven like lightning. And I think the meaning behind that is, while you were casting out devils, I was watching the devil being cast out. But you could also interpret it this way. It's no surprise you can cast out demons. I saw the king of the demons be cast out. He's always going to be subjugated. He's always going to be in submission. He's always going to be second fiddle. He's always going to be defeated. So the fact that you can cast out a demon, well, of course you can. Their boss was cast out. So either way, it works. But you hear the similarity between that and the wording that you just heard from Isaiah. They're very similar, but they're not the same. If anything, Jesus, who would have it all memorized, not just because he got the Holy Spirit, but because he's a good little Jew, would be remembering Isaiah's words and would just be doing what Jews do, which is taking the phraseology and just extrapolating it to apply to something else. But Isaiah is not talking about the devil. And to show you that, if you're still open in Isaiah 14, go back to verse number 4. And look at verse 4 and somebody read it out loud. And unlike Ezekiel, Isaiah flat out tells you. I mean, Ezekiel did too, Tyre and Sidon, but we ignore that. Isaiah will tell you who his audience is. Isaiah 14:4.
That you will take up this proverb against the king of Babylon and say.
Against who? Against the devil?
King of Babylon.
King of Babylon. Go ahead, carry on, please.
How the oppressor has ceased, the golden city ceased.
No, I know I told you to do it. Now you've heard. Oh, did you say it?
How the oppressor has ceased, the golden city has ceased.
Yes, thank you very much. The golden city being Babylon itself. The king of Babylon being its ruler. Thank you. Now you've heard Babylon. You've heard king of Babylon. Now that's in your mind. I hate to do it to you again. Let's read the text again. Read verses 12 through 15 again. 12 through 15 again. Same context. You've heard king of Babylon, Babel the city, 12 through 15. Doesn't matter, anybody.
How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down from the ground, or to the ground which doth weaken the nation? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pits. They that see thee shall narrowly look upon thee, and consider thee, saying, Is this the man that made the earth to tremble, and did shake kingdoms?
It's okay. That's fine. No, you're good. No, you're good. That's okay. You can't overread Isaiah. All right. Do you hear? Now you hear Babylon. Now those same references that so easily could apply to Satan make much more sense when they're applied to a cocky man in the middle of a golden city like Babel, like a Nebuchadnezzar or Nebuchadnezzar, someone like that. Someone who has gotten too big for their britches, who believes them to be on the height of God. Which, by the way, that the word of doom against them even flat out says, this arrogant person says, I will ascend up to heaven. But I thought the fall of Satan's story begins with him in heaven descending. You see how the little details get glossed over when we just make assumptions? But in the actual proverb of doom against Babylon, it is this guy who says, I will ascend to heaven, I will make myself the most high, I will be the greatest, I will be the best. And God says, no, you won't. Boom, I'm going to smack you down. Now you can say, just like he did with the devil, fine. If we assume the devil is a fallen angel, then that's a fair statement. But Isaiah didn't say that. So we shouldn't use Isaiah to make that point. And I know in Ezekiel's translation, it says Lucifer. Maybe in a lot of yours it does too. And that's where it comes from. Lucifer is the devil. Lucifer is the name of the devil. Lucifer is his name. You got Michael, you got Raphael, you got Lucifer. These are all angel names. No. Lucifer is what the very next phrase says, the morning star. Lucifer is the name of the morning star. It's a name for the morning star, which I believe is Venus, if nothing else. But it's just the name given its bright shining star. But if you go into it thinking Lucifer is the name of the devil and you stick that there, then everything else kind of changes around it like the butterfly effect. But if you take the devil out of it, which you should not do because it's evil and so he's there. But if you take the devil being the object of the prophecy out of it and you put Babylon there, it makes a whole lot more sense. Here's a guy who thinks he's the brightest shining star, and he's not. God is, in the proverbial sense. And he'll smack them down. All right, that's the end of last week's class. Now, with the time we have afforded to us, you can read the chapter on ancient victories over evil. But I wanted to have two studies. One that talked about how the devil is just doing a lot of work. Not good work, a lot of successful work throughout the Bible. In either literal or metaphorical ways, whenever there is evil, the devil is behind it. And so it just seems like as you go through the Old Testament, the devil's always winning. But he's not. Throughout the Old Testament, there are victories over the devil. Not explicitly stated over Satan, the devil, the enemy of God and man, but victories over evil, which the devil is wielding against us. So, like in Genesis, you've got Joseph's brothers who do evil, and the devil is happy to see them cast their brother into the pit. But then God, by his providence, pulls him out of the pit, puts him in a place where he can save all of his people, much to the devil's consternation. You have the devil watching over Egypt, inciting the Pharaoh to say, the new Pharaoh say, I don't respect the old Pharaoh's God that he came to know thanks to Joseph. I don't respect the Israelite people. I see them as an invasive species, a menace, and I'm going to wipe them out. I'm going to kill them. And he starts murdering people en masse and putting the rest into slavery. And the devil rejoices. And then Moses rises up and frees them, and the devil frets with consternation. Israel, now out of Egypt, starts to grumble and murmur and complain and gripe, and the devil rejoices. Yes, see, I did it again. I didn't even have to talk to him this time. I managed to turn them away from God just by the evil environment that I have cultivated over the past few centuries. And then God kills the evil ones, and God brings up the second generation, and through Joshua they are led into the promised land, and they win. And the devil frets with consternation. And this cycle keeps going. Speaking of cycles, the whole book of Judges is that. You have this nation of God's people who fall into rebellion and wickedness because they stop thinking about God. They forget about God. They think they can do it without God. And the devil rejoices because that's what he wants all of us to think. And God smacks them down, puts in an oppressive nation to subdue them, and then raises up a judge, a Gideon, an Othniel, a Shamgar, a Deborah. And he raises a judge up to free the people. And the devil has to do that. Because no matter what the devil does, the most the devil can do is subdue you. The most the devil can do is get you to turn away from God. The devil cannot subdue God. The devil cannot stop God. All the devil can do is get you to stop listening to him. And when you do, in the Old Testament, God smacks you down. And you say, oh, I'm sorry, God. And those are the words the devil doesn't ever want to hear. And that's the through line of the Old Testament, which is the devil does a lot of successful work, turns a lot of people away from God. And then God says, yeah, okay, that's far enough. And he steps in, does something good, and the people turn back to God. And no matter what the devil does, he can never stop God from doing that. And yet frequently, throughout the Old Testament, God stops the devil from doing that. It's always a one-way street, because he has all the power, the devil does not. And that through line throughout the Old Testament continues into the New, up to and including your very lives. Because what can the devil do to you? He can lie, he can deceive, he can entice, and he can get you to sin against God. And in that moment that you sin against God, the devil rejoices. And then, with all that work that he put into getting you to sin, creating this environment of evil that you fall victim to, whispering those sweet nothings and those bitter lies in your ear, all that work, all that time, and all that energy to get you to sin, you, as a Christian, only need to say, I repent, and it's all undone. Now, how frustrating must that be for the devil, right? That's not your power. That is God's power working through you. That is the power of the cross given to you, you being part of the body of Christ, whom he cannot subdue, whom he cannot defeat. So, I had more. We were talking about Elijah on Mount Carmel, or Elijah and Elisha raising the dead, which is the ultimate victory of the devil, as he would see it, which is killing somebody. As in the beginning, if you touch the tree, you will die. And the devil said, that's my goal, to get you to die. And expressing that in terms of physical death is the ultimate expression of his power over humanity. He killed people. And Elijah said, yeah, but not for long. And he brought him back. And Elisha brought them back. And that is just segues and teasers, foretastes of glory divine, when he will raise us all up. God will. So that's the quick and dirty version of that. Next week, we will go to the New Testament. We will start with the temptations of Jesus, which do not just encompass the three that we're famously known of. That's all. Thank you.